Hello, everyone. I am very excited, as always, about our next video on Africa and Africans in the Bible. And this is part 10. Honestly, I thought that this would be the last one, but I keep seeing different people that of Hamitic descendants. They're descendants of Ham. And it's the Bible is my main resource. So that is why I am showing these people. Most time they'll be highlighted, and then I'll give you more information on them. But again, I do want to encourage you as we go through this. Not only are you going to learn about more and more people of African descent that are in the Bible, but you could also use this time to, as in read and study and learn more and more about God as we go through this, what God is saying with different people, how he's using different people, the the way that he wants us to behave according to his will and to his way. And it shows us very much how when we don't obey, what happens. So again, just take your time and read, get your Bible. Again, you can always pause it and read it yourself with your family member or with your group. But again, just take time to enjoy it and to learn about God. So in this particular video, we are going to go over Solomon's wives. Number two, Hadad, who is an Edomite. He's a descendant of Esau. Number three, Jeroboam. He's an Ephramite. He's the first king of Israel. And then there's Shishak, king of Egypt. And number five is Elijah and the widow at Zarephath. So we're going to learn a lot of interesting thing about them. Again, we're going to do a good bit of reading. So please enjoy, but take time and learn. Pause if you want to discuss it again with your group, your family member, or even yourself. Just use this tool in the way that's best for you. So we'll start off again with Solomon's wives. Because again, I'm going to show you, remember, he had a lot of wives. If you've read the Bible, you know that Solomon, who is King David's son, he had a lot of wives, and we're going to read that scripture. So in 1 Kings 11 and 1, it says, King Solomon, however, loved many foreign women besides Pharaoh's daughter. So he married Pharaoh's daughter, but he loved a lot of other women, foreign women. And these are those women. You will see the Moabites and the Ammonites. And I didn't highlight them because they're not of African descent. These are actually the two daughters, people who actually, when Lot, they thought that Lot was the only male, left, and they needed to carry on their family line. They actually, unfortunately, had relations with their father, and then the Moabites and the Ammonites are the descendants of Lot's daughters being with him, unfortunately. But in red, we see the Edomites, the Sidonians, and the Hittites. These are people of Hamitic descent, and they are African. And oftentimes when I say Africans, sometimes they are biracial to Africans. So in number two, it says they were from nations about which the Lord had told the Israelites, you must not intermarry with them, because they will surely turn your hearts after their gods. And notice, as we look at that, when he said you must not intermarry with them, he didn't say because they are dark in color or they're not, they part African. He didn't say anything like he said you must not do it because he said they will surely turn your hearts after their gods. So make note of that, because some people will have you think that the Bible is just totally against people of dark skin, and say as in Africans, and that is not true. So nevertheless, Solomon held fast to them in love. He had 700 wives of royal birth. Oh my goodness. And 300 concubines. And his wives led him astray. Now let's do the math. 700 wives, 300 concubines. All of these were women. That's 1,000 that Solomon had access to. How many did he have children by? So it's still quite interesting, but it does show again that a lot of the women or the children that he did have were children that were of Edomites, Sidonians, and Hittites, meaning they are African. Number 4, as Solomon grew old, his wives turned his heart after other gods, and his heart was not fully devoted to the Lord his God, as the heart of David his father had been. He followed Ashtoreth, the goddess of the Sidonians, and Molech, the detestable god of the Ammonites. So Solomon did evil in the eyes of the Lord. He did not follow the Lord completely as David, his father, had done. Okay, and so now we'll go to our next topic, which is Hadad, the Edomite. And he's from the royal line of Edom, which is Esau. So let's begin reading. Then the Lord raised up against Solomon, this is before Solomon died, an adversary. The adversary was Hadad, the Edomite, from the royal line of Edom. Earlier, when David was fighting with Edom, Joab, the commander of the army, who had gone up to bury the dead, had struck down all the men of Edom. Joab and all the Israelites stayed there for 6 months until they had destroyed all the men of Edom. But Hadad, still only a boy, fled to Egypt with some Edomite officials who had served his father. And I wanted to go over when I did have those. If you look back, I did have those highlighted. Hadad, the Edomite of Edom. So let's look more about this young man. The strong Hebrews tell us that Hadad, his name meant mighty, and he was a member of the royal house of Edom, who escaped the massacre under Joab and fled with a band of followers into Egypt. After David's death, he returned to his own country. And the strong Hebrews also tells us about Edom, which it means red. It says Edom or Edomite or Endymion, the descendants of Esau. So again, this tells us that that's who the Edomites are. So they set out from Midian and went to Paran. Then, taking people from Paran with them, they went to Egypt, to Pharaoh, king of Egypt, who gave Hadad a house and land and provided him with food. Pharaoh was so pleased with Hadad that he gave him a sister of his own wife, Queen Tahpenes, in marriage. The sister of Tahpenes bore him a son named, I love this, Jeroboam, whom Tahpenes brought up in the royal palace. There, Jeroboam lived with Pharaoh's own children. So it's like he grew up, this young man, one that he had, grew up with the Pharaoh's children with all of their privileges. So again, those were highlighted, and I want to show you the strong Hebrews concordance says that Tahpenes was the wife of the king, an Egyptian queen in the time of David and Solomon named Jeroboam. Okay, and the strong Hebrews also tell us that Jeroboam, his name is odd. The names they gave different people, but his name equals theft. He was the son of Hadad, an Edomite of the royal family, by an Egyptian princess, the sister of Tahpenes, the queen of Pharaoh, who governed Egypt in the latter part of the reign of David. So that's more information on those two people. So let's continue reading. While he was in Egypt, Hadad heard that David rested with his ancestors and that Joab, the commander of the army, was also dead. So see, he was concerned about these two because remember, they were the ones that killed pretty much all of the people, the Edomites in that particular area. And so he stayed away from there until he heard that they were gone. So then it says, then Hadad said to Pharaoh, let me go, that I may return to my own country. What have you lacked here that you want to go back to your own country? The Pharaoh doesn't seem like he wanted him to really leave. And Pharaoh asked, it's nothing. But Hadad replied, but do let me go. He said, I'm not liking anything. He said, but I do want to go back to my home. I do want to go back to where I came from. So that's that story. So now we will start on number 3, which is Jeroboam, son of Nebat. He's an Ephramite, the first king of Israel. Now let's begin reading. 1 King 11. Also, Jeroboam, son of Nebat, rebelled against the king. He was one of Solomon's officials, an Ephramite from Zeraphath, and his mother was a widow named Zeruiah. Remember, there are names that are highlighted, and we will give more information on them. Here is the account of how he rebelled against the king. Solomon had built the terraces and had filled in the gaps in the wall of the city of David, his father. Now, Jeroboam was a man of standing. And when Solomon saw how well the young man did his work, he put him in charge of the whole labor force of the tribes of Joseph. So you see, David thought a lot of Jeroboam. But we will see if that continues, as we know it won't. We've already read about Hadad. So in the Strong Hebrew Concordance, it says that Jeroboam, name it, the people will contend. And it says he was the first king of the northern kingdom of Israel when the kingdom split at the death of Solomon, and the 10 tribes split off from Judah and Benjamin, and the kingdom under Solomon's son, Rehoboam. Now, in the Beth, we did see that, because it said that's who Jeroboam was from. That was his people. But Nebath means, it says, aspect, excuse me, an Ephraimite of Zeraphath, the father of King Jeroboam I, of the northern kingdom of Israel. Strong Hebrews also tell us that Zeruiah, her name meant full-breasted. Imagine that, boy. She was the wife of Nebath, mother of King Jeroboam I of the northern kingdom of Israel. So that's a little information about those 3. So let's continue reading. 1 Kings 11. About that time, Jeroboam was going out of Jerusalem, and Ahijah, the prophet of Shiloh, met him on the way wearing a new cloak. The 2 of them were alone out in the country, and Ahijah took hold of the new cloak he was wearing, and he tore it into 12 pieces. It was like it was new. He took it off, and he just ripped it up into 12 pieces. Then he said to Jeroboam, take 10 pieces for yourself, but this is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. See, I am going to tear the kingdom out of Solomon's hand and give you 10 tribes. And it just still amazes me. We're going to see more that's in green. That's God speaking to Jeroboam. But God was doing this because of what Solomon did and turned against him. And he's making almost like an offer to bless Jeroboam, because of what Solomon did. He's taking it from Solomon, giving it to Jeroboam. But that we have to always remember that God knows everything. He sees everything. He's always interested in giving us a chance to do right, to get it right, so that he can bless us. But again, Jeroboam did not do right. And let us not be mistaken thinking that God didn't know what Jeroboam was going to do. Yes, he did. He did. He knew he's going to do, just like when he accepted us and loved us anyway. He knew the things we were going to do. He's not caught off guard by the things that we do or the behaviors that we do or the things that we say. He's God. He knows everything and he loves us. So let's continue to read what God is saying to Jeroboam through this prophet. But let's see what those two words that we had highlighted meant. In the Strong Hebrews, its name sometimes say Ahiah or Ahijah. And he was the brother, it says brother of Jehovah, Yahu. He's the grandson of Phinehas. Now, several videos back, we learned more about Phinehas. Phinehas was the son of Eleazar, the priest. He was also the son of Aaron, and that's who Eleazar was. Moses' brother, who married one of the daughters of Putiel, who was put of God. El means God. So he was a Pushite of God, but he still was a godly man. Strong Hebrews also tell us about the Shalonites, and it says, see Shiloh, place of rest, an inhabitant of Shiloh. And we've learned about Shiloh in other previous videos also. So let's finish reading about what the Lord is saying, the offer he's making to Jeroboam. He said, but for the sake of my servant David and the city of Jerusalem, which I have chosen out of all the tribes of Israel, he will have one tribe, but I will not take the whole kingdom out of Solomon's hands. He's still having mercy because of David. He says, I have made him ruler all the days of his life for the sake of David, my servant, whom I chose, and who obeyed my commands and decrees. I will take the kingdom from his son's hand. And he's telling Jeroboam, I'm going to give you 10 of them. And I love it that even though if you've read the story of David, we know David did some things that was not right. But I love it the way God sees, he sees the things that we do, but he's willing to forgive us when we ask for forgiveness, which David did ask for forgiveness when he had Uriah the Hittite killed. It says, whom I chose and who obeyed my commands and decrees. He's saying that he obeyed, knowing, that he did not. But God can make all things right. He calls those things that are not righteous, he can make them right. And he does make them right. So let's continue on. It says, I will give one tribe to his son so that David, my servant, may always have a lamp before me in Jerusalem, the city where I chose to put my name. However, as for you, Jeroboam, I will take you and you will rule over all that your heart desires. You will be king over Israel. So this is him again speaking to Jeroboam. But we're going to see the evil that Jeroboam end up doing and decisions that he makes. He says, if you do whatever I command you and walk in obedience to me and do what is right in my eyes by obeying my decrees and commands, as David, my servant, did, I will be with you. I will build you a dynasty as enduring as the one I built for David and will give Israel to you. I will humble David's descendants because of this, but not forever. Solomon tried to kill Jeroboam, but Jeroboam fled to Egypt, to Shishak the king, and stayed there until Solomon's death. So let's read some more of 1 King in the 12th chapter. It says, Rehoboam, remember that's the son of Solomon, went to Shechem, for all Israel had gone there to make him king. When Jeroboam, son of Nebat, heard this, he was still in Egypt, where he had fled from King Solomon. He returned from Egypt when he heard that. So they sent for Jeroboam, and he and the whole assembly of Israel went to Rehoboam and said to him, "Your father put a heavy yoke on us, but now lighten the harsh labor and the heavy yoke he put on us, and we will serve you." Rehoboam answered, "Go away for 3 days, then come back to me." Like he said, he's gonna think about it. So the people, basically Jeroboam's people, they went away. Then King Rehoboam consulted the leaders who had served his father Solomon during his lifetime. "How would you advise me to answer these people?" he said. "These people, they want, us to basically do right by them and not, treat them so harshly." And he has told them again to go away for 3 days and come back. So he's asking the elders, "How would you advise me to answer these people?" he asked. And they replied, "If today you will be a servant to these people and serve them and give them a favorable answer, they will always be your servant." So these are older people, wiser people who are trying to advise King Rehoboam in the right direction to go. But we're going to see he did not listen to the older, more seasoned people as they were trying to advise him. But Rehoboam rejected the advice the elders gave him and consulted the young men who had grown up with him and were serving him. He asked them, "What's your advice? How should we answer these people who say to me, 'Lighten the yoke your father put on us'?" But the young men who had grown up with him replied, "These people have said to you, 'Your father put a heavy yoke on us, but make our yoke lighter.' Now, tell them, 'My little finger is thicker than my father's waist.'" See, they just being silly, and yeah, they're ill advising King Rehoboam. And unfortunately, he's going to reap the consequence of listening to these younger people versus listening to the more seasoned people. And I'm not saying all young people don't have, good advice or can't give good advice, but these did not. They're saying the silly thing, like I said, this last sentence, "My little finger is thicker than my father's waist." They are not that giants like that. So let's continue with 1 King 12. It says, "My father laid on you a heavy yoke." This is what Rehoboam is saying to Jeroboam and the others people. "I will make it even heavier. My father scourged you with whips. I will scourge you with scorpions." The king answered the people harshly, rejecting the advice given him by the elders. He followed the advice of the young men and said, "My father made your yoke heavy. I will make it even heavier. My father scourged you with whips. I will scourge you with scorpions." So the king did not listen to the people, for this turn of events was from the Lord to fulfill the word the Lord had spoken to Jeroboam, son of Nebat, through Ahijah the Shilonite. So we have to know God is always working when it seems like things are right, or they should go this way and they go that way, or they should go that way and they go this way. And we're not going to always understand what God is doing when he's using different people or different events. But God was using this because of the situation and behaviors of Rehoboam. So when all the Israelites heard that Jeroboam had returned, they sent and called him to the assembly, and they made him king over all Israel. Now, when it's saying all Israel, that means the 10 northern tribes. Remember, they split. There was 10 of the 12, 10 were in the north, 2, which Judah and Benjamin, were in the south. And it says, only the tribe of Judah remained loyal to the house of David. And when Rehoboam arrived in Jerusalem, he mustered all Judah and the tribe of Benjamin, 180,000 able young men to go to war against Israel, which is Jeroboam and the other 10 tribes, and to regain the kingdom for Rehoboam, son of Solomon. But this word of God came to Shemaiah, the man of God. Say to Rehoboam, son of Solomon, king of Judah, and to all Judah and Benjamin, and to the rest of the people. This is what the Lord says. Do not go up to fight against your brothers, the Israelites. Go home, every one of you, for this is my doing. Lord said, I'm doing this. This is me doing this. So they obeyed the word of the Lord and went home again as the Lord had ordered. And notice it say again. Then Jeroboam fortified Shechem in the hill country of Ephraim and lived there. From there, he went out and built up Peniel. Jeroboam thought to himself, the kingdom will now likely revert to the house of David. And if these people go up to offer sacrifices at the temple of the Lord in Jerusalem, they will again give their allegiance to their Lord Rehoboam, king of Judah. They will kill me in return to King Rehoboam. And what's going on is that, remember, we said that the 12 tribes had split, God had split them into two, 10 in the north, 2 in the south. So where the south was, where Judah was, that was actually where God had established that as his place. That's where the temple was. That's where Solomon built the temple was. And Jeroboam and the others had went north. So what he's saying that if the people in the 10 that are in the north return back to do all of their worshiping and their, on the different sacrifices that, they were told to honor God with and to come to the temple. He is saying, now we're up here. If we go down there, then these people might want to stay like it down there or feel like they should be, staying down there, and then they won't come back to the north. And he's saying, then they'll just end up killing me, and then they'll just return to King Rehoboam again, who was of Judah, and with the tribe of Benjamin that were in the south. So after seeking advice, the king Jeroboam, the Lord already blessed him, told him what he'll do for him. And instead of him remembering what the promises God has made for him and what to do for him, and we have to remember that God has made many promises to us, but we can do things that would just null and void those things. And this is what Jeroboam is doing, King Jeroboam of Israel. He said, after seeking advice, this king Jeroboam made 2 golden calves. Remember, God said, thou shalt have no other God before me. He said to the people, and those are the people in the north, it is too much for you to go up to Jerusalem, as in, for you to go traveling all the way back to Jerusalem. Here, with these 2 calves, here are your guards, Israel, your gods, Israel, who brought you up out of Egypt. Now, good and well, they did not bring them up out of Egypt, but one he set up in Bethel, the other in Dan, and this thing became a sin. So see, he sinned against God when he did this. He's creating other gods in the places up in the north. And remember, Dan is one of the 10 that the tribes, and so they went up there and they were going to Bethel. So he set up a place in Bethel. And again, this thing became a sin. The people came to worship the one at Bethel and went as far as Dan to worship the other. So he was causing these people to turn against God and then going to Jerusalem, going to the temple that Solomon had built, because and under God's instruction and all of the things that David had saved up. He wanted to do it, but God said, no, you're not going to do it. Your son's going to do it. Solomon's going to do it. And so instead of him wanting them to go back to the actual place that God had built, because he was scared that they wouldn't let him be king, he built these two golden calves, and that's when it says, and this became a sin. So we cannot have any other gods before the true and living God. So Jeroboam built shrines on high places and appointed priests from all sorts of people, even though they were not Levites. So he knew what the right thing to do, because God had appointed the priests to be from the Levites, only from the Levites. But it shows us he appointed priests from all sorts of people. Now let's go into 32. It says he instituted a festival on the 15th day of the 8th month, like the festival held in Judah. So he was creating his own festivals, just like the ones that the Lord has set up. He's creating his own. It's like he's creating another place, temple, like the Lord had built up in the area where they were, so they wouldn't be going back down there. This he did in Bethel, sacrificing to the calves he had made, and at Bethel he also installed priests at the high places he had made. So let's go to 1 King in chapter 13. It's saying, altar, altar. He's talking to the altar. And altar, altar. This is what the Lord says. A son named Josiah will be born to the house of David. On you he will sacrifice the priests of the high places who make offerings here, and human bones will be burned on you. They talking to the altar, saying that. That same day, the man of God gave a sign. This is the sign the Lord has declared. The altar will be split apart, and the ashes on it will be poured out. So when King Jeroboam heard what the man of God cried out against the altar at Bethel, remember it was this one that he had built, he stretched out his hands from the altar and said, seize him. But the hand he stretched out towards the man, it shriveled up so that he could not pull it back. So he couldn't, it was so shriveled, he couldn't even pull it back. And also, the altar was split apart and its ashes poured out according to the sign given by the man of God by the word of the Lord. Then the king said to the man of God, it's Jeroboam saying to him, intercede with the Lord your God and pray for me that my hand may be restored. Now he want his hand restored. He ain't saying nothing about his heart, nothing about his mind. He is talking about just his hand. So the man of God interceded with the Lord, and the king's hand was restored and became as it was before. Even after this, though, Jeroboam did not change his evil ways, but once more appointed priests for the high places from all sorts of people. Anyone who wanted to become a priest, he consecrated for the high places. This was the sin of the house of Jeroboam that led to its downfall and to its destruction from the face of the earth. We cannot disobey him. When God tells us to do something, we have to obey. It is our own selves that a lot of times we bring things on ourselves. Not always, I'm not saying, but a lot of the time when we disobey, we're going to reap from the seeds that we've sown. Okay? So we're going to go to Shishak, because remember that he was mentioned, this king of Egypt was mentioned when we were reading about Jeroboam. So in Strong's Hebrew Concordance, Shishak, his name means greedy of fine linen. I don't know what that means. Yeah, fine linen. Yeah. But it tells us he was the king of Egypt. Shishak, and depending on the different version, it was pronounced the name a little differently or spell it differently. But he's from the 22nd dynasty. He ruled in Egypt during the reigns of Solomon and Rehoboam and attacked the southern kingdom under Rehoboam and apparently made it tributary. So remember, the southern kingdom is made up of Judah and Benjamin. Those are the two. And Rehoboam was Judah's son. So in 2 Chronicles 12, it tells us after Rehoboam's position as king was established and he had become strong, he and all Israel with him abandoned the law of the Lord. Because they had been unfaithful to the Lord. Shishak, king of Egypt, attacked Jerusalem in the 5th year of King Rehoboam with 1,200 chariots and 60,000 horsemen and the innumerable troops of all of these are of African descent. That's why I highlighted them, and I don't have to tell you any more about them because we went over them, these groups of people in earlier videos. But the Libyans, Africans, the Sukhites, Africans, the Cushites, Africans, they came with him from Egypt. So he is the king of Egypt, but he also brought more Africans with him to battle. It says he captured the 45 cities of Judah and came as far as Jerusalem. Then the prophet Shemaiah came to Rehoboam and to the leaders of Judah who had assembled in Jerusalem for fear of Shishak. And he said to them, "This is what the Lord says. You have abandoned me. Therefore, I now abandon you to Shishak." Remember, king of Egypt. The leaders of Israel and the king humbled themselves and said, "The Lord is just." It's like he's right. What he's doing to do for us is right. And when the Lord saw that they humbled themselves, this word of the Lord came to Shemaiah. "Since they have humbled themselves, I will not destroy them, but will soon give them deliverance. My wrath will not be poured out on Jerusalem through Shishak." So he's saying it's not going to be poured out through Shishak, but he just said it wasn't going to be at some point. "They will, however, become subject to him, so that they may learn the difference between serving me and serving the kings of other lands." So he's telling them through the prophet Shemaiah. So when Shishak, king of Egypt, attacked Jerusalem, he carried out the treasures of the temples of the Lord and the treasures of the royal palace. He took everything, including the gold shields Solomon had made. Again, if you're reading the Bible and you read back before, there is a chapter that talks about, and verses that talked about those gold shields that Solomon made, and they were full gold. They were gold, which shows us even more and more. This is all is happening on the continent of Africa. Remember I said Africa was full of just great resources. People went there and raided Africa to get the natural resources that the Lord put in the grounds and in the people of Africa. And it's just amazing how even now people are continuing to do it, or there are people that want to say that they are the true Egyptians, or they are the true people that are from Put, with the Pushites, which some people now are saying Phoenicians. These are all people of African descent that God blessed. So we're going to move on to our last one for this particular video, part 10. It's about Elijah and the widow of Zarephath. Now, this is good. You have to have heard of this one, because not only we're going to go over the chapter about this in the Old Testament, but it's also mentioned in the book of Luke in the New Testament. And watch and see. This is amazing what happens in the book of Luke. So in 1 Kings 17, it says, "Sometime later, the brook dried up because there had been no rain in the land. Then the word of the Lord came to him, 'Go at once to Zarephath in the region of Sidon.'" Remember Sidon, he's a descendant, he's Hamitic, "and stayed there." And I will say that sometimes it says Sidon, S-I-D-O-N, and sometimes it's Z-I-D-O-N, Sai and Zai. So it's still the same though. It says, "I have directed a widow there to supply you with food." He's saying this to, Elijah. So he went to Zarephath. Then he came to the town gate a widow was there gathering sticks. He called to her and asked, "Would you bring me a little water in a jar so I may have a drink?" As she was going to get it, he called, And can you bring me, please, a piece of bread?" And I'm going to go over Sarah, probably like 4 or 5, telling you about the people, Zeraphath and Sidon. But Zarephath, it's a city between Tyrus and Sidon. It's called Zeraphath, and it says by Luke, because again, it is mentioned, and we're going to read this story again in Luke. It says to Zidon. It says to the jurisdiction of that city, which therefore was inhabited by Gentiles. And we're going to notice even more so because of the way the people are going to react in the New Testament when it's brought up to them about Zarephath. And God providing for his prophet, Elijah, first by an unclean bird. And again, if you want to read, you can go a couple chapters prior to the ones that we're reading. You can read about the unclean bird. And then by a Gentile, whom the Jews esteemed unclean, was a notable presage of the calling of the Gentiles and of the rejection of the Jews. And that's what Jesus is saying. And they knew that in the New Testament when they did what they did, and we will see later. Gill's exposition of the entire Bible says, "Arise, get thee to Zarephath, which belongeth to Zidon, and dwell there." This might be a trial of the prophet's faith, because again, Elijah knew about these people. He knew who they were. He says to be sent to dwell in a place belonging to Zidonians, among whom, if you may not remember, Queen Jezebel, as we did in the previous videos, she is connected with the Zidonians. It says, among whom Jezebel had an interest, being the daughter of their king. It says the place is so called to distinguish it from another Zarephath. Then the NAS Exhaustive Concordance mentioned, it says it's a Phoenician city on the Mediterranean coast, and it says also a son of Canaan. So again, this is showing us here, because we're going to go in probably in another group of videos on about how a lot of the history was stolen from Africans, and Phoenicians tried to take credit for a lot of things that people of African descent had done. But this is telling us right now, as you remember back, if you're looking at this, and if you're looking at that, sometime it may be towards the end of the year or the beginning of next year when I fulfill this particular set of videos. But the Phoenicians, how are they going to be Greek when it says they're from the son of Canaan? And even the NASB translation says Sidon, or remember we said Zidon. The Briggs driver, Brown driver Briggs book even says of a location in Sidon. It says ancient Phoenician city on the coast north of Tyre in Assyria. The Assyrians, Phoenician, it says Old Aramaic, and it says in Egyptian, the firstborn again of Canaan. He was the firstborn of Canaan. Remember, the ones that people always said that's why people of color or Black people, Africans, are cursed, because of the curse that was put on Ham. But actually, it was the portion that did, not that they were told it, because God even had it where a lot of his people were marrying Canaanite people. So at the end, it says northern limit of Canaanite. In the strong exhaustive concordance, Sidon, again, Zidon, says fishery, because remember it is near the ocean. It says the name of a son of Canaan, of a place in Palestine. It says Sidon or Zidon. Strong Concordance, Zarephath. Now we're talking about Zarephath. And here again, as they spell it, some spell it with the Z, some spell it with the TS, but it means it's a smelting place, a city south of Sidon. And then we look at the NAS Exhaustive Concordance. It says again, smelting place. And then NASB translation, it just said Zarephath instead of this particular spelling up here. So I just wanted to show you so many different concordance, because again, I just have a feeling that in years later, When somebody see this, they're going to be changing these definitions in these particular books that prove that a lot of these people are of African descent and that a lot of these places are in Africa before they made the great divide with the Suez Canal and decided, okay, everything over here is African, over here, everything over here is not, which is not true. So let's start reading. As surely as the Lord your God lives, she replied, I don't have any bread, only a handful of flour. And remember, this is that widow that Elijah was talking to. Only a handful of flour in a jar and a little olive oil in a jug. I am gathering a few sticks to take home and make a meal for myself and my son that we may eat it and die. Elijah said to her, Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. Go home and do as you have said. But first, make a small loaf of bread for me from what you have and bring it to me. Then make something for yourself and your son. So basically, he's asking her to have faith, to trust in what he is saying, that what is God who sent him is saying to her. And for this, is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. The jar of flour will not be used up, and the jug of oil will not run dry until the day the Lord sends rain on the land. Because remember, initially we said he went there because it had not rained in a long time, so they were in a drought. So she went away and did as Elijah had told her. So there was food every day for Elijah and for the woman and her family. For the jar of flour was not used up, and the jug of oil did not run dry, in keeping with the word of the Lord spoken by Elijah. So sometime later, though, the son of the woman who owned the house became ill, and the son, he grew worse and worse, and finally he stopped breathing. And she said to Elijah, What do you have against me, man of God? Did you come to remind me of my sin and to kill my son? So she's saying that she has done, some wrong things. And she's thinking that she is reaping that her son is being killed because that's how she's reaping what she's done. Says, this is Elijah saying to her, Give me your son, Elijah replied. He took him from her arms, carried him to the upper room where he was staying, and laid him on his bed. Then he cried out to the Lord, Lord, my God, have you brought tragedy even on this widow I am staying with by causing her son to die? Then Elijah, he stretched himself out on the boy 3 times and cried out to the Lord, Lord, my God, let this boy's life return to him. Like I say, he did it 3 times. The Lord heard Elijah's cry, and the boy's life returned to him, and he lived. Elijah picked up the child and carried him down from the room into the house. He gave him to his mother and said, Look, your son is alive. Then the woman said to Elijah, Now I know that you are a man of God, and that the word of the Lord from your mouth is the truth. And so now we're going to read about this story and the reaction that happened with Jesus when he mentioned this story. So we're going to read from the book of Luke, the story of Elijah in the book of Luke. It says, Truly I tell you, he continued, no prophet is accepted in his hometown. I assure you that there were many widows in Israel. See, God, Jesus was saying that, yeah, there are a lot of widows in Israel in Elijah's time. But remember, when we read it, he sent him from there to this widow in Zeraphath. It says, when the sky was shut for 3.5 years, and there was a severe famine throughout the land, yet Elijah was not sent to any of them. He was saying, I didn't send Elijah to any of those widows that were in Israel. I sent them to these other people. He says, but a widow in Zeraphath in the region of Sidon. And there were many in Israel with leprosy in the time of Elisha, the prophet. Yet not one of them was cleansed, only Naaman the Syrian. Again, they're not happy with that because again, there are a lot of people who had leprosy in Israel. He didn't cleanse them. He cleansed basically a foreigner. So all the people in the synagogue were furious when they heard this. They got up, drove Jesus out of town, and took him to the brow of the hill on which the town was built in order to throw him off the cliff. But Jesus, he walked right through the crowd and went on his way. Again, that's God being God. He's still visible, but he was able to have himself. However, these people didn't see him. They were all trying to get him to that cliff so they can push him off because he is saying that he helped the woman in Zarephath and he helped Naaman, but he did not help the Israelite, and they did not like that. So they want to just push him off for saying that. But again, remember, God is God. He knows best, and he is a good God. So again, thank you, thank you, thank you. We're going to stop the video now, and just remember, the Bible is Black history. There are other people in there, other groups. The people from Shem and the people from Ham are in the Old Testament. Japheth is mentioned in one or two sentences. You'll see his people somewhat in the New Testament, but for the most part, the Old Testament is about Africans, and they're in Africa, and they did intermarry with a lot of the Israelites and the Hebrews. So again, God bless you, and you have a wonderful, wonderful time on this this adventure that I am happy to take you on. Okay, God bless you, and have a good day.